Sometimes God sends things into our lives to test the proposition, all are welcome. I first have to apologize to Catherine, our office admin. It is not a misprint in the bulletin for the gospel lesson. I simply changed it this morning. I have that prerogative as pastor. But to explain my change, the last week of the season of Easter, which we are in, is a bit awkward. You see, Ascension Day always falls on that Thursday of the last week of Easter. And so on Thursday we had Ascension Day, and then on Sunday we have the readings for Easter, week 7. And so that leaves me caught in a bit of a bind because we didn't have a church service on Thursday. Do I give you the Ascension Day readings, or do I give you the Easter 7-day readings? And at about 9:22 this morning, I decided to split the difference and give you the first 2 readings from Ascension Day and the gospel lesson from Easter 7. That's all church nerd stuff. It won't be on the test. You're all thanking me, I know. For my sermon today, I have one thing to say to you all, and I hope you don't take it as an offense, but here it is. Y'all are weird. You're misfits. You're strange. And better yet, you worship a weird and a misfit and a strange God. If you get nothing else from this sermon, only that weird and strange God can help. John chapter 17 is part of a long farewell speech Jesus is making. He is at the Last Supper, what is called the Last Supper in the other Gospels, and Jesus is giving this long speech to his disciples as he is preparing them for the fact that he will be crucified, died, risen, and will ascend into heaven. So he is trying to prep his disciples for the fact that he will not be with them in the same way that he has been with them going forward. And so in chapter 17, we get this prayer that Jesus is making to God on behalf of the disciples. It gets a little confusing because Jesus is repetitive and he doesn't follow my grammar teacher's instructions that you should use proper names instead of pronouns. So there's a lot of yous and me's and on their behalves, and you get lost wondering what Jesus is talking about. But in verse 14, Jesus has this to say. I have given them your word, and the world has hated them, because they do not belong to the world, just as I do not belong to the world. The hard thing about the Gospels, perhaps one of the hardest things, is that Jesus says we do not belong to the world, that we are in fact weird, that we are strange, that Jesus is weird and strange and doesn't belong to the world any more than we do. And the hard part about that is that we desperately, deep down, want to be normal. We want to fit in. We want not to be weird. We see this all the time, right? Anytime a famous person expresses their Christian faith, or anytime an athlete kneels down in public, we kind of say, oh, isn't that wonderful? And it is, but the feeling should make us pause a little bit, because part of what we are saying is that, oh, it's reassuring to know that even the famous and the cool people have faith. We're not so weird. We want to fit in. And worse yet, actually, the people who obviously don't fit in, we harass, right? Those who are obviously different are marked for exile in this world. Because we want to fit in, and we want to be normal, and we want to belong to the world. And so does everybody else. And so those people who can't in our society, can't because of language barrier or skin color, or can't because they are different or they love different or they behave differently, those people who can't have a hard time because we desperately want to belong to the world and desperately want to be normal. Of course, the catch there, the real trick is that normal doesn't get us anywhere good, usually, right? There's a lot of things that's normal in the world, and most of them, quite frankly, lead to death. They don't lead to any new life. And so our path to normal is really a path to death. So that's why, brothers and sisters, it is good news when Jesus calls you weird. And be clear, it's Jesus calling you weird, not me. I'm just quoting you the Bible. Jesus says you don't belong to the world, that neither did he. That you don't belong to this earth, that you are weird, you are misfits, you are strange. And that is good news because Jesus says this God is also weird and strange and doesn't really belong to the world. And the good news in that is that means God can do all sorts of wonderfully weird things. That God can unconditionally forgive. Think about how weird and strange this promise is. That God unconditionally forgives, not because you work hard enough, not because you earned it, not because you changed your life, but God just forgives freely all the time. It's weird. And yet, thanks be to God, it's not the way the world normally works, because the way the world normally works, there is little forgiveness. And it's even stranger that God raises people from the dead, that you enter death itself, and then God raises Jesus Christ from the dead, and that is our ultimate hope, as Paul wrote in Ephesians. Paul said, the hope to which we are called, and the hope to which we are called is a weird and strange hope. A hope that God forgives and God raises the dead. All right, so I know what you're all thinking. You're all thinking, okay, Pastor, you've convinced us we're weird. Thanks for that. So what? The so what is what Jesus says next. I am not asking that you take them out of the world, but that you protect them. As you have sent me into the world, so I have sent them into the world. That's the so what, folks. Jesus isn't promising that we'll be taken out of a world that desperately wants normal. I sometimes wish he was. It would be easier, wouldn't it? If we could just hunker down here until Jesus comes for us and never go out into the world, it would be easier. But Jesus says, no, instead I send you out into the world. I know you don't belong to it, but I send you out. You're to be sent out knowing that you are weird, knowing that you are strange, knowing that you don't quite fit. You're to be sent out because there's a whole lot of people who need to hear that there is a God who is strange and weird and doesn't quite fit either. There is a God who makes all these strange and odd promises. And they need to hear that this strange and odd God makes promises of unconditional love and unconditional forgiveness. To tie it back to Ascension Day as I close. At the end of your Acts reading, there's this rather funny moment where Jesus ascends up into the clouds in the sky, and the disciples are all caught looking up. Just stuck like that. And it takes two angels descending to tell them, hey, yo, get moving. The angels ask them why they just stand there looking up when they have been sent out. As it says right there on the screen, we are all witnesses. We are all sent to the ends of the earth to proclaim this God who is weird and yet forgives and raises the dead. Amen.